All right, so as you have all seen so far, the title of this workshop is Giving EL Students Voice Through Multimodal and Narrative Writing Projects. And I will talk a little bit more about myself, but some of you know me, some of you don't. My name is Aleksandra. I am originally from Macedonia. I currently live in Tucson. This is almost my 5th year. I'm calling from my classroom, as you can tell, and I apologize if you hear students screaming in the hallways. For some reason, they like to stick around even after classes are done. I do have, as every good teacher, as they teach us in school, teacher school, I do have 3 objectives for us with this session. So I'm hoping that by the end of this workshop, you as participants will be able to recognize how important multimodal and narrative writing projects are to incorporate into our ESL and SEI classrooms. For those of you that are not familiar with the term SEI, SEI stands for Structured English Immersion, which is something that we use here in Arizona as a model for our English learners. I hope that you will be able to identify several steps to potentially incorporate at least one of the presented projects in your current teaching context. And then in the end, I'm really hoping that we'll have some time to practice how to start working on one of the presented projects. So a little bit about me. Like I said, I want to give you an idea of what I work. I'm currently a high school English teacher. I teach 11th and 12th grade. I'm also a high school and middle school SEA teacher in Sonoran Science Academy, which is a small charter school in Tucson. My SEI classes are very small. My biggest class has 9 students currently, and then I have 2 other classes with 2 and 3 students, which are put together based on their language level and grade level. In addition to this, I'm also the English language development specialist in my school. This means that I support teachers to accommodate and work with EL students in their classrooms. That also involves administering the AZELA, which is the English language proficiency test, both for placement and reassessment. And I work really closely with my EL coordinator and EL district director, who are really wonderful and very supportive people. So I do some fun things here. I do want to hear a little bit about you, and more specifically, my questions here on this survey are targeted towards writing. So I have 2 questions. If you could scan the QR code, you can also access this link. And I think I have my Mentimeter survey over here. So you can use this code to go ahead, and there we go. So the first question I have, because this is a writing related workshop, how often do you assign writing projects to your students? Any kinds of writing projects? Often, occasionally, rarely, or this does not apply to you? Because I know that there were several people who are not currently teachers. So if it does not apply to you, let me know. But you would just go to www.menti.com and use the code that you see up on the screen. Okay, so some people teach very often, rarely, 1 person that does not apply. I'll give you another minute. I know there are more people here. Cool. Often, rarely, okay. All right, I'll switch back to this one afterwards. I do have, let's see, does this go forward? Often, cool, awesome. All right. All right. Hold on, I have another question here. Where did it go? Is it out? Okay, is this the same one? Yeah, it's the same code. So my other question was, if you have, okay, Can you read this question on your screen from your side? I wasn't sure if you can. If you can unmute yourselves, that would be helpful because I don't really know why this question does not show up.
Yeah, I saw the question earlier, Aleksandra, but there it is. Now I can see it. What questions or concerns do you have regarding teaching narrative or multimodal writing? Right?
Yeah, I wonder, can you actually type on this one? Because for some reason it does not allow me to. Okay, view results. Let me see if this one has. Okay. Maybe we could do this one instead on the chat. I don't really know. I think.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you have any questions or concerns regarding teaching narrative or multimodal writing, so you can do this question in the chat, and I'm going to also include this for you. Time, how many classes? Awesome. Time is definitely a huge one, especially because writing does actually require a lot of time. I'm gonna actually, time was another one. I'm gonna copy and paste my question here, just in case someone missed it. There we go. So what questions or concerns do you have regarding teaching narrative or multimodal writing? And maybe some of those will be answered during this presentation. How many drafts of one piece of narrative work? Okay. Scaffolding, definitely. Drafting, how many drafts are okay, especially in correspondence to students' proficiency. All righty. Awesome. Oh, vocalizing a narrative before writing it down is a good step. Okay, yes, definitely. If you can get your students to do this, that's awesome. All right, maybe Angie, towards the end, we can chat a little bit about that. Awesome. Thanks, everyone. I appreciate your feedback. Okay, sketching, definitely. All right, let's continue. So before we move on, I did want to talk about why did I choose this topic. I'm really passionate about writing. I do think that from my experience, there is way too much emphasis that's put on academic writing in all classes. I've taught for 2 years in higher ed context, college level, and then now I'm K through 12, and both of those are very, very heavy on academics. I think that students rarely get to write about what matters to them. Most of the times we're just giving them the topic, we are assigning, and here you go, do it because it's important for college, for the future. I think that students are rarely encouraged and taught how to write in a personal and creative manner, and even less so to share their stories through writing. Kind of in line with this is that narrative and intimate writing is important, just as important as academic writing, but the reasons and purposes for this are obviously different. That does not mean that personal writing is a little less important than academic. I do think that when we allow students to write about themselves, we show them that they actually matter and they do have a voice in our classrooms. I'm hoping that through my projects, through these ideas that I will share with you today, you will actually see how this got included or how this actually got seen in my classroom. All righty. So since part of the title was giving EL students voice, I do want to hear from you. Again, if you want to unmute yourselves or in the chat, what does the term student voice mean to you? Especially, I know that several people here are still in academia. Academia has maybe slightly different interpretation, but how do you understand student voice? And we have here instructor 2.
I'm sorry, I can change my name.
Go ahead. Oh, hi.
Hi, everyone. I think it's how coherent your students' writing sounds to what they have shared in the classroom. Because to me, I think one way or the other, we always know whether a piece of writing belongs to this particular student or not, you know, depending on the words they use, on the way they organize their ideas and stuff like that. So I think they do have a particular voice. And even when they try, I feel like even when students try to to copy things from somewhere else. We always know how to identify those pieces, you know.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I love that. Thank you. Let's see, anyone else? I think it means how students' way of being and or identity comes through or is conveyed through writing. Awesome. Thank you. Then we have a reaction. All right, anyone else? Awesome. I really like this point. All righty. So obviously, as every good student or teacher does, I went online and I saw what's out there. I was looking for specific, something that kind of has what I had in mind. And I found this definition by this nonprofit called Great Schools Partnership, which says, in education, student voice refers to the values, opinions, beliefs, perspectives, and cultural backgrounds of individual students and groups of students in a school, and to instructional approaches and techniques that are based on student choices, interests, passions, and ambitions. Something that stands out for me in this definition are the words student values, opinions, beliefs, perspectives, cultural backgrounds, as well as choices, interests, passions, and ambitions. So when I think about student voice, I think about their ability and freedom to share their personal stories and experiences in a school setting without any judgment or obstacles. I strongly believe as a teacher that when students have a voice, they feel seen, they feel comfortable, they feel confident, and they feel cared for. And when students embody and evoke all these feelings, they're definitely more motivated and open to learning in our classrooms. So with this idea in mind, I have tried several projects this school year. Some of the projects that I'm sharing are projects that I've done before. But one that I have done, and it definitely stood out for me, I'm going to stick with, is a narrative writing project. I want to mention that the next half of the presentation, I will try to keep things a little bit more practical. Like I said, even in the flyer, the idea with this project and with this workshop is to give you some tools that you can practically use in your classrooms, and you can feel free to adapt as you want or as you need. So my first project that I want to talk about is writing an autobiography. A little bit of curriculum context. This year, students, so this was last semester. Students were reading a text about Frederick Douglass on our supplemental curriculum platform, which we got this year. It has worked really well for students, so this was part of the unit. When it comes to grammar, students had been working on past simple tense, more specifically progressive a little bit, but we were focusing mainly on the past tense. They were looking into regular and irregular verbs, so we spent quite a bit of time working on this grammar section. When it comes to the student population for this project, we did my students, so I implemented this project in my high school SEA class, which has 9 students in total, and they're all ranging from 9th to 11th grade. I don't have any seniors in this class. Their language level is low to high intermediate based on their AZELA, which is the state test result. But even from my personal classroom assessment, that's where they're at. So the objectives for this project, the academic objectives are, so they're related to ELP stands for English Language Proficiency Standards. I need to remember that actually there's people that are from other states and countries on this call. These are standards that were revised by the Arizona Department of Education in 2019, and we are using them as a guidance for our SEA classes. So I was targeting this specific standard, which is speak and write about grade appropriate, complex, literary and informational text and topics. In this case, it was literary text. I2 stands for intermediate level. So the standard has a couple of levels within it. I was targeting the standard that says that students will be able to compose written narratives using appropriate conventions that include details, narrative techniques, and precise language to develop a topic. I really like to simplify these academic objectives in my own way. So what I really wanted students to do was to be able to compose their autobiography by developing an appropriate text structure, including storytelling details, And to incorporate that grammar component, I wanted them to use the past tense. Beyond the academic objectives, though, is where the student voice idea comes into play. I wanted to learn details that I didn't really know about my students and their families. Some of the students that I currently have in my essay class, I've had them for about 2 or 3 years, but some of them, they joined my class during the pandemic, so we didn't have as deep connection as I would have wanted to have with them. I was hoping that through this project, my students felt a little bit more empowered to share parts of their life and feel seen by me as their teacher. I have several students that are very shy and that have gone through some really difficult things in their lives. And I also wanted my students to actually notice that any kind of story matters and that writing can be about them and their experiences. So that was my final goal. I think several people in the chat mentioned the idea of how do we prepare students for writing. And I think it's kind of a year-long and consistent process. For this specific type of project, I took a couple of steps. So as I mentioned, we were reading Frederick Douglass's biography. When we read text in my class, we were specifically looking into content, obviously ideas, but then I also draw their attention into how the text is actually structured, how the text is organized, what details are included at the introduction, what details are included at the end, and so on and so forth. We do also analyze specific type of grammar when we are working on past tense, like in this specific case. I draw the students' attention to where the tense is used. Why do we use this? So there's that idea of teaching grammar or teaching a tense for form, but also function. How do you say the specific verb in the past, but also why is the past tense used, let's say in this case. I have to know that we read a biography, so the text was written by someone else, but students knew the difference between biography and autobiography during this unit because the unit was focused on different literary genres. So they learned about fiction, they learned about nonfiction, short stories, and what are all those elements that go into those. So that was the first step. The second step was we definitely reviewed the forms and the functions of the past tense for narrative writing. And like I said, we looked into a couple of specific sentences taken out from the text and saw how the author wrote this sentence. Is this a simple, is this a complex sentence? Where is the tense, where is the verb? How can you write this differently, and so on. And finally, to help students brainstorm, I gave them this project outline. So I'm just going to briefly go over this, and I will be very happy to share any of the materials that I'm going over this presentation with you today. So first part was basic information, details such as place of birth, date of birth, story of their name, education, and then I had questions about their personal life. So who are your friends? What are some things you enjoyed doing in your free time? I definitely made sure to include this question, which is, what are some memorable events from your life? What are your biggest accomplishments and successes so far? What have been your most difficult moments, struggles, and visions of themselves for the future? So they had the freedom to do bullet points, paragraphs, whatever they needed, because this is an outline just to help them kind of organize their thoughts a little bit more. So this is actually the project prompt that I shared with the student. In the first part, my project prompts always have the context. So what's the context? How does this fit into the things we're doing? What is this project about? And I made sure to actually write here that, before you think that you have nothing to say, which happened, I told them that they should pause, think about this whole story that they read, look at their brainstorming guide, and then again, their life journey and experiences are important, they do matter. In all my assignments, I do chunk up things for students. So what are some of the steps that they can take? So looking back at the autobiography, paying close attention to the text and details, to textual details, and then using the brainstorming guide. And finally, expectations, meaning because this is an autobiography, you need to include factual information about you, personal information about your life experiences. I do make sure that they do not feel compelled to share something that they do not feel comfortable. And then for grammar specifically was looking to see how they were using the past tense for narration and then to highlight those verbs. The last thing was using pictures, which was optional. Nobody actually used them, but I thought I'd give it a try. What I'm going to share in, like I said, so this is a screenshot. Some of my assignments or projects here are linked. I don't know how we're actually going to do this, but eventually I could share. You will have my email at the end, and you can feel free to adapt and use as you would like. What I'm going to share are 3 student samples. All of them are shared with permission. My students got very emotional when I told them that I'm going to share this with you. And I am going to have you actually read them on your own. So this is the first one. I'm just going to make this probably here. So this girl talked about how she cannot see her grandma, who is a very important figure in her life, for 5 years. And then this is the rest of, this was towards the end, actually, this was her concluding paragraph. And both of these parts contain information I definitely did not know about her. I did not know that she wanted to be a surgeon or a dermatologist, or the reason why she wanted to be one of those things. I think the emotional part for me comes in the end when she says, and I will buy my mom and dad their own house and their dream cars and help them pay bills and stuff that I know I can do right now to thank them for all the hard work they had done for me and my brother to give us a house, food, and study, and for thinking on our future and bringing us to another country where you could have a better life. This is one of my hardest working students, and as you can see, her language progress has been truly incredible. I am so very proud of her. She is acing all her other classes. I mean, she's just wonderful. And when I read all these autobiographies of, so it was 9 students. I think I read them each like twice, and I don't even know how many times I cried when I read them. Full disclosure. All right, so this is another student from the same class who talks about how his family was, lived separate for a little while because his dad had to work in the US. Like it said, so the students' names, father had to work 2 or 3 jobs at a time to make enough money to take care of them in the country where he's from. During that time, he lost 16 pounds and his hair started thinning. So the student actually noticed his parents' struggle here. The other piece of this is where he talks about his academic environment and how he was discriminated because his English was very limited when he started here, how he was mocked and bullied by kids, how he was stressed, and then ultimately the parent pressure, right? So towards the end, he talks about, although he knew that his father wanted the best for him, the atmosphere at that time was always so sudden that he felt like he wanted to die. Prolonged fatigue and stress made him a quiet, smiling, and less expressive person. The only one who notices this in him is his mother, who always asks, "Why did you smile before? That's a lot to say, but why aren't you like that now?" He just shook his head and said he was fine. And then the last piece of this is, him looking himself at the future. So the main goal in which he's going now is college and university, because he wants a promising future for himself, and more than anyone else, he knows that he doesn't have the same level of English as other people. So when they put in 100 efforts, he has to put in 1,000 efforts to be successful in order to repay the sweat and tears that his parent has put in. This particular biography, I think, was about 3 pages, and it had layers upon layers upon layers. And since this very moment, I learned a lot of things about my student that I did not know. And I'm very grateful for those things, because I had been able to check with him ever since and make sure that he's fine emotionally, because it revealed a a lot of mental and emotional struggles. And this last one, I love it so much because this student wrote about herself, just like the previous student, from third person point of view. So she talked about herself as she, and she put herself in 2032, where she imagined herself with her own house, car. She traveled a lot. She went through many things in life, many lessons, many rejections and humiliations, but then she never gave up and fulfilled every one of her dreams, no matter what anyone said about her. I love how she viewed herself as an engineer with a lot of accomplishments. And then me, who wrote this about her name, can say that I'm very proud of her. And I am very proud of her. So I really hope that she becomes an engineer. So these are just 3 samples. Like I said, it was a little hard to select which of those I wanted to share with you today. But I chose this one just because of the emotional effect they had on me and the writing style. And some of the things that I took away from this project, like I said, I learned things that I never really knew about my students, and this project deepened our connection. Like I said, thankfully, 2 projects revealed that my students struggle mentally and emotionally. We were able to, I personally and a couple of other people were able to intervene and support our students a little bit further. They definitely gained more writing confidence. They were not as resisting to others' creative writing assignments that I gave them after this. Several students used the past tense correctly. Awesome. Several needed further support. So I noticed this, where they needed past tense, they still use the present. Obviously not, it wasn't interfering with the understanding of the text, but since that was the goal, I could still give them further support. A lot of students actually used a lot of descriptive language and details, and that was very great to see, especially in the case with my second student. There were certain parts where he just described the whole scene, where he was at the airport and how there was sunset. It was beautiful and very emotional. And as I'll share with some of the following projects, this was actually one of their favorite and most memorable assignments this year. And I gotta say, it was really for me too, because of all the reasons that I actually outlined here. So I know that several of you actually have lower level students. Like I said, this was a project done with my intermediate level high school students. If you were to adapt this project for students with a little bit more limited language proficiency or a lower grade levels, I would say maybe shorten the project length requirements. Instead of having them write, I think I had them write 2 double-space pages. You can have them write 2 paragraphs. If they're even more limited in their language proficiency, you could provide some sentence frames or sentence starters for them to use. You could ask students to use drawings or visuals instead of words. And I would even allow them to bring pictures and to use their own language to describe the pictures. I have used students' first language. I can only, sadly, understand Spanish pretty well. I don't speak the other languages that my students speak in the classroom, but maybe using a translation tool would kind of help with this project and allow our students to express the best sides of themselves in the language that they feel comfortable in. So now I do want to ask you as my audience to pick one of these 2 questions, and you can respond in the chat or you can just unmute yourselves. I think if you unmute, that might be even faster. So what do you think about this project? And if you would like to incorporate this or try this out in your classroom, how would you do this, knowing your student population? And how do you think, or what would you add, or what would you take from the suggested project to fit your student population and the lessons you have covered, are currently covering, or might cover with your students? So that's the current question. Let me see if I can see. I see kind of most people here. There we go. So the chat is open, or if anybody would like. Oh, literacy narrative. I love that project. Yes. I don't know how to do the chat here, maybe. I'm hoping that people are actually typing in the chat. Okay, awesome. Thank you for sharing this. Do the students use an app to create digital portfolios? Can they see previous work easily and notice their progress, or do they use paper and pencil? Third graders, awesome. Okay, I'll get to the portfolio part. I like the sample. Yes, I actually wanted to ask the students. I asked the student, why did you decide to, it's a very interesting choice. Why did you decide to use third person point of view? And he said that if he could distance himself from his personal experiences, it makes it easier to share the truth, because sometimes he feels like it's just way too much to share from first person. No, honestly, I told him that, you know, probably the more suitable or natural part would be if they were to use I, right? And I did not instruct them to use it that way. It was students' actually personal choice. This is a student who also reads a lot, so I wonder, probably that had to do something with it. Oh, I like this. So Gianna, and then I'll get to Bisera's question. So our second graders read a number of narrative stories for the Civil War unit, for example, about a spy named Sarah Emma. I could see doing some spin-offs, like having them write about a time they were brave like the spy. Yes, I love this. We recently did a project where students were, the unit was about history, so history, social studies related terminology, and I had them take a role of a historian or archaeologist and then research or imagine even the specific kind of discovery that they found or something that they uncovered. So they had to get into the role and think about it. I really like this. I feel like also for kindergartners and or K through 5 level students, that would be a lot of fun. For the digital portfolios, that's actually my next part. This specific assignment, it was just done on simple Google Docs, so they typed it out. Can they see their previous work easily and notice their progress? Paper and pencil, I use it mainly for smaller writing assignments. I think most of them do a lot of essays in high school, and I also want them to learn the formatting and other demands. The progress of their work, I personally ask them to do a lot of reflections, which is also something that I'm going to be talking about next. Sometimes when I give them feedback, punctuation and sentence boundaries, specifically in the grammar part, or development of ideas, are something that students need most help with. And a lot of times I will give them the feedback, I'll ask them to revise, or next time I will write things like, okay, goals for next time. This is what I want you to do. And I usually pick 2 things. So when I grade it and if I see improvement, I call them and I'm like, okay, last time you didn't do this, but this time you did that. And if they still do it, I still put it as a goal for them. So I just really focus on 1 or 2 things. Multimodal memoir project. That sounds wonderful. Letter writing to teachers. Awesome. I don't do as much poetry. I would love to do that. Letter writing to teachers. I do this at the end of the school year and I like that, so I'm gonna write it down. Awesome. And then the role ones. See, they can collecting ideas here. Awesome. I am going to move us to the next part of the presentation, which is, how do I do this? Okay, there we go. Which is the multimodal projects. And some of you might be familiar with this kind of projects. Some of you might not be. I think all of you are. There's just this term multimodal that I want to clarify before we proceed with the actual projects. So the meaning of multimodal, it has so many definitions out there. The one that I found is very simple and I really like it because of that. It's by Dressman, 2019, who says that the term multimodality refers to the combination of multiple sensory and communicative modes, such as sight, sound, print, images, video, music, and so on, that produce meaning in any given message. In even more simple way, it's the idea that when we communicate or when we share a message, we do not necessarily need to use just written text or writing, but we could use other modalities such as it says here, music, videos, drawings, pictures, paintings that kind of merge with that and then make our message more holistic and more effective. In addition to this, the same author says that in digital age, multimodality has become even more central to communication, and this is especially true for language learners who depend on the multiplicity of channels available on a screen to help them pick up meaning in the target language. So this actually supports the idea that our language learners really could take advantage of this type of modes of communication or projects because of the whole meaning-making process that goes with it. So Bisa had a question, which she kind of probably sensed that this is where the whole thing is going. So the first project that I want to talk to is a portfolio. I would assume that most of you are familiar with this. If you're not, then great. You're going to learn a little bit about portfolios right now. Portfolios, first time I learned about them was during my college years. And then while I was teaching at the U of A, we were doing portfolios with our English 100 level students as a final reflection. So I really love them. I use them in all my classes, not just in my EL or SCA classes. I use them in my high school level English classes. So basically, portfolio is a collection of the work the students have completed over a period of time. So it could be a semester or during the whole year. I've done it both ways. It's up to you to decide at what point of the school year you want to do it. It's usually accompanied by a written reflection about what students have learned through a specific set of lessons, tasks, and assessments. In my class, we don't have access, sadly, to Adobe. Adobe Spark was a great platform where we used to do portfolios before when I was teaching in a different context. Currently, I use Google Slides, or Canva. Students love Canva. So one of these three because it's easily accessible through your Google Drive. Now, the reason behind the use of portfolios for a classroom project is, one, it's a great authentic assessment. Two, it allows students to actually see their own growth. So it's not just me grading their work, but it's also motivating them to pause, look back into all these assignments they've done and see what are the things they have learned. They're looking into certain lessons and assignments. They're thinking about what are some of the things that I actually learned and I can actually use. Students are also very good at noticing what are the things that they didn't learn or they don't feel as confident using, and then that they set as a goal for the future, improve in those specific areas. And I really like it because it's a type of assessment that is kind of seemingly low stakes, but it allows them to document the learning process and, do a lot. They do a lot of the work that the tests, I don't think they do as honestly, as effectively or as thoroughly. And then final step is, how do you incorporate a portfolio? I'll share my prompt for students that are not familiar with this. And when I first started doing this, most of my students were not familiar. They were like, what is this portfolio thing? I have no idea. But then because I've done it twice with my SCA students last year and this year, the second time it was so much easier because they already knew my expectations. It does require step-by-step explanation of all the steps that they need to take and all the goals we have with this project. What I highly recommend that you start thinking about perhaps next year, if you're not doing this so, is to include reflection throughout the whole year. In my class, this usually happens on Fridays during, we have Friday short days. So it's kind of like 3 questions. What did you learn? What are you confident about? What is something you still want to know? Maybe it could be at the end of the unit. Maybe it could be by them creating some vocabulary notebook, really anything that I wouldn't say forces them, but encourages them to look back and see what are the things that we have covered. I think it's really important to get students into the habit of learning, of thinking actually, what is it that they're learning? How are they learning that? And to what extent they're actually learning the things. And finally, how are those things important? I think that's where the hard part comes, convincing students that what we are learning is important and you're going to use this somewhere in an XYZ place. Same thing, academic objectives. There is a standard that says adapting language choices to purpose, task, and audience when writing. I was specifically targeting this writing standard, which says students will be able to use technology to produce, publish, and update individual writing product, taking advantage of technology's capacity to display information flexibly and dynamically, which is what a portfolio actually does. So this is my prompt for our final. This was a semestral reflection. So as you can see here, I did ask students to, actually first I explained what a portfolio is. So it's a collection of the work you've completed this semester, things you learned, how you have improved. And obviously it's that idea of looking backwards so that we can set goals for moving forwards. And that's what I want them to also have there. This part is really up to the instructor. I've done this in so many different ways. With my SCI students, I try to keep this a little on the shorter writing end and more on bullet points, pictures, whatever they would like to have. If you have more advanced students, they could write a full essay. They could record themselves as they're talking about the assignments that they were doing. I don't know, maybe just a voice memo or something, depending on what your goal was. But here I ask them to write one paragraph in which they talk about other classes, because I want to know how they're actually doing from their perspective, because I know from the teacher's perspective how they're doing. One paragraph in which they talk about the experience in my class, what are things you learn, some vocabulary, grammar, so on. This is the important part. I asked them to go back and look into important assignments, why they were important for them. So what did you learn from them? Why were they important for them? And if possible, like I said, a list of goals. So for the portfolio creation, like I said, it's Google Slides, Google Sites, which they kind of confuse with slides, and then finally Canva. And then to organize their portfolios, obviously, I don't know about your students, my students are fairly disorganized. So thankfully we have online learning platform like Schoology is one we're using, or Infinite Campus for scoring. So they go back there and kind of look around. For this one, I did not include my rubric, but because I wanted also to see the writing, I was looking for, I hate to give them a number, but because they always ask for paragraphs, I say, okay, 5 to 6 sentences, good sentences. What assignments they chose, list of goals. And because this is a multimodal project and organization matters, they're being graded on that too. So at least make it a little pretty and visually pleasing for your reader, which is me. Going back to this, I am going to share, I think I have 2 or 3 samples also shared with student permission. So this is my first student. So she talked about the interesting classes. She made a list. As you can see, there is a paragraph on this side, bullet points. So she already thought about organization and then all these cute images around to actually show or represent her classes. Same thing. So she talked a little bit about other classes she's doing. I didn't know that they were writing poems in her English class. That was wonderful. So I also got to tell her teachers, this is what you like. Good job. Keep doing what you're doing, right? A little bit of pep talk for our coworkers. This one was the interesting part because I asked them to reflect on challenging classes, because with one of the students whose portfolio I did not share here, but I learned several things that she actually struggled very hard with one of the classes. That student is new to the country and she did not communicate with the teacher. So me as kind of them being my proteges in a way, I was able to actually go and talk to the teacher, get a little bit more context. In about 2 or 3 weeks, she was able to follow a little bit better because he accommodated differently. So that was really helpful. Like I said, you can actually maybe ask different kinds of questions, but I really like this. She actually went back and listed all the topics. So good job. And then this was for my class. Things I learned, see, they actually mentioned writing the autobiography, It's true for the student that she did improve in grammar, but there's still work to do with grammar. So with her, it's always the same writing goals: punctuation, sentence boundaries, punctuation, sentence boundaries. Like I said, the confidence is coming, but it's still a little bit of work left to do. Then we have the students, so things we learn in SCI, so vocabulary, idioms about money, right? She thought about all this organization. So this student wrote grammar improvements that I learned a little because we were more focused on vocabulary. And when I read this, I was like, she is right, because last semester we did focus far more on vocabulary and maybe 1 or 2 grammar units, which we continue talking about. So that was a sign for me to actually start thinking how I can do a little bit more grammar. There's always way too much to do with students, but finding ways to actually leverage all of that in one place. And then last one was this one. This was a student I had both in my English 11 and my SCI class. Sorry, that was the speaker. This was very helpful because I knew also, so I got some feedback also for the class that I was teaching, and I already knew what are some things that I should not do or should do better, which one of them was connected to the play Othello. And you can imagine why the student was struggling. And then the last, so ELD or also SCI, her favorite class. That's true. She really enjoyed this class. I obviously feel very happy when students are enjoying classes. I wanted to show this one because the student also mentioned the autobiography and how she actually read and wrote about herself. And then the portfolio. She said, it's one of my favorite ones because I'm talking about everything that I learned this semester. And I think it's very nice and cool to remember everything that you learned in the past and the whole semester. Absolutely agree. So they thought about things they learned. They thought about all the details, how they want to organize the text, which is where the multimodal part comes in. So overall, I think several students did not write goals. Several did, several didn't, which is where you are as an instructor would determine how to assess that. But most of the time, I mean, for the most part, I think they did reach my expectations. So from this project, my takeaways are obviously I got a better insight how they did in their other classes. I always make sure to check with their teachers, but sometimes, teachers would say one thing, students say another thing. This was a little bit more from student perspective. I gathered really valuable feedback about my assignments in my SCI class. So I knew what to focus more and what I need to maybe do a little less of. And then I definitely recognized patterns in areas where students struggled, as well as the improvements I needed to make so that my instruction gets better and I could address those struggles of the students, in a timely manner. If you want to adapt this project with students with limited language proficiency, I did this with a student that is really, really pre-emergent. So I selected a few assignments and I was like, do you remember this? Tell me what you remember. So what are the words you learned from these? You could also select a couple of images where there's like, I don't know, light bulb, some kind of emoji where students are confused or like, yay, confident, positive, and maybe ask them to write down assignments or specific vocabulary. And last thing I did just last week with this new student I allowed her to write her portfolio in Spanish. Like I said, Spanish is the only language that I could read and understand what the student is saying. If you have students that speak Spanish and you speak Spanish, you could do that. But for the students that have other languages, you could probably allow them also to use translation tool for parts of the project. And then, maybe for the rest, you could, they could use the English for the rest of the assignments. All right, let me see the chat. We're right. The why of using portfolios. All right, we'll get back to this towards the end, maybe open for discussion. So before we get into the practical part, this is my last project, and it's very brief because I don't have student samples. I'll explain why. I call this the visual identity map. I'll explain why. I have the prompt there too. It's a project that I signed during the first week of school. If you like it, it will save you a couple of days of planning because students can work during class. It's a wonderful project for the first week. It kind of gets students excited about things because they talk about themselves and, you know, about their lives. So I do it at the beginning and start of the school year because I want to get to know my students beyond like, how was your experience in other classes? Or what can you tell me about yourself? You know, the simple things. So I really want to see who my students really are, what they bring to my classroom, and how I can actually work with them. To prepare for this project, you as an instructor, you don't really need a lot of preparation except for the prompt. You can adapt as you wish. I would recommend that you maybe guide students because I exclusively do this on Google Sites, and students, most of my students do not know how to use Google Sites. So maybe helping them organize the information a little bit in an online platform, having them think about this looks nice, this does not look as nice. Sometimes their pictures are scattered all over the place, which fits the purpose a little bit. And again, the point is to have them think how they can represent themselves in the best possible light and get them excited about things. Google Sites is great. It's the closest to mini website that you can get out there. So this is my prompt. Like I said, this is what I have come up with. Feel free to adapt as you wish. I ask students about their names and the story behind their names. Definitely ask them to include pictures, and they always do pictures of friends, of family, things where they do hobbies, music they listen to, maybe they play some music, videos of themselves, favorite movies, TV shows, anything really that, maybe a book that has made an impact on them. Cultural traditions. I actually learn a lot about my students through this one. So what kinds of things they do at home, what holidays, what celebrations, and so on. Topics you're passionate about, and so on and so forth. So this part is also something you can adapt. I asked them to write 2 paragraphs. One is short reflection on how the selected pictures, music, topics, objects, anything you have included have shaped you into the person you are today. And then the other paragraph is, based on your life and education experiences so far, who would you like to become? And not just in the sense, I want to be a doctor, but I want to be a person who. So a little bit of that. And I wrote here, it doesn't have to be 10 years from now. Most of them don't even know what they're going to be doing tomorrow, which is absolutely fine. But it's like, how do you envision yourself? The key thing to highlight here is that they do not need to be formal. This is not an academic writing assignment. They need to include as many pictures, videos, drawings, and this is the part where they really get excited about, because this project is all about student choice and it's how they want to be seen and how they want to be represented. So basically, what is it that you as a student or as an individual are bringing into this whole classroom setting and the whole educational journey that you're going to have? Depending on how you want to grade this, as long as students have completed all of this, for me, it's a completion assignment. I don't make this, a big project or anything. Obviously, everybody has different approaches to grading. So there is this one. The prompt is here. Now, I don't have student samples for this project, and you could probably guess the reason. When you're creating the whole site, the project has a lot of student identifiable information, their names, where they come from. Everything is about them. Most of the project have a lot of personal pictures. So if I were to have those in cut pieces, they would definitely take away from the effect of the project. I will encourage you though, in the next 5 minutes, I'll give you some time. I'm aiming for us to finish by 5:15 to actually try to create a Google site for yourselves. All righty, same thing. So to adapt this project for students with limited language proficiency or even lower grade students, if you have lower grade students, I would try to do something maybe like a small vision board where they may be cutting pieces of certain things and putting it on paper, kind of like a poster, or even them bringing pictures, sticking them together so that maybe they could have a formal presentation. I don't know, that's something that I feel like might be fun and cute for K through 5 or even K through 6 or 7. If you have students that are with more limited language proficiency, same thing, I would maybe cut the number of requirements so you could pick and choose. Instead of students using full sentences and paragraphs, they could use simple parts of speech. So to describe themselves, I don't know, funny, cool, interesting, quiet, right? If they would probably have those words in their vocabulary bank. Or nouns to talk about their hobbies. I don't know, hiking, running, video games, and so on. I think with lower level students, with more limited language proficiency, key thing is more videos, more pictures, more music, because in this case, they would definitely communicate their message and their point even more through those instead of relying on the language component. And finally, not just for students with limited language proficiency, I would say for all the students, you can model the assignment for them, at least getting them started on Google Sites, which is what I do every single year. I think I have like a lot of drafts somewhere on my Google Drive where you try a picture or maybe have a pre-made website. So you could share it with them as we move forward. All right, let's take about 2 minutes to get to this question here, and then I'll show you the final task. So same thing, how do you think incorporating multimodal projects in the classroom enriches students' language learning experience? Does it? To what extent? And how do you think any of these 2 multimodal projects would fit your curriculum, and what would you do to adjust them to your student population and teaching context? Especially the second one, I'm really interested how you think you would do this slightly differently so that your students are really into it and they're ready to do it. All right, chat. Awesome. Keeping the chat here. You can also raise your hand or just unmute yourselves, or the chat is there. I'm not, yeah, I think I'm following here too. Okay. All right, so we got one answer for the first question. How does it enrich, how do this kind of project enrich students' learning experience, language learning experience? So effective communicators, they see they can make complex messages through storytelling and multimodal elements like images and sounds. Going back to this, they're seeing how they're using English in meaningful, personal, and real ways. Awesome, I love that. So the combination of all those elements. This is not exactly related to the technology aspect of multimodal projects, but it made me think about how we can bring more of students' senses into the classroom. I love this. Taste, touch, smells. One of my coworkers here, she teaches a different language, but she does all these projects with food where students bring different fruits, different vegetables, so they have to describe them using that specific language. And it's, you know, from what I've heard, it's really wonderful. So that's another idea. Instead of doing the technology part, doing the senses. We do focus so much on visual and auditory communication, but it would be interesting to incorporate more senses in general in the language learning experience. Yes, that was awesome, Diana. Love this. Thank you so much. Maybe I will do this now. I'm getting more ideas. For question number 1, I think incorporating multimodal projects is definitely a good choice, and many studies have shown how multimodality really helps students to express themselves better. Definitely. Especially for when we do something that is personal and matters to us, we all want to like showcase ourselves in the best possible way, right? And sometimes written language doesn't capture all of that. I have students write a traditional essay and a multimodal essay, video script, and a video. It helped them engage in writing, understanding the nuances of multimodality and writing literacy. Yes, awesome, especially when you do a comparison of both. That is very, very valuable because they also have the like higher level skills of comparative analysis. Awesome, everybody. Thank you so much for your answers. All right, so I did have this ideas just for a final task, and you can engage to the level you feel comfortable or to the level that you have time. I know for some people it's the different time zones, so it might be a little late. But my final task, I wanted to put you in the role of a student. Obviously, you're a participant here, but take the position of a student and then choose one of the 3 tasks on the next slide and then follow the instructions. I'll share the instructions in a second. The purpose here is just to engage a little bit with the project, see how you might do them, if you want to do them, or even maybe what would be a struggle for students once they get started. The goal is to practice how to actually do this and how to better apply it in your classroom whenever it's suitable. So talking about all these 3, you have 3 options here with 3 guiding questions. If you were to choose to write an autobiography, maybe if you feel comfortable, tell us what was one formative experience you had as an educator this year. So if you were to write your autobiography as an educator, what would you focus on using some descriptive words and past tense? Tell us maybe why that formative experience was important for you, how that impacted your identity, both as an individual and educator. Second project is the portfolio. If you have not used Google Sites before, this is a good moment to use that. So think about how you might want to build a small website for you, and specifically for this practice, maybe think about one experience that you had and was very memorable this year. Could be both personal or professional. Now, I know we're also slowly running out of time. You do not need to find photos right now, but think of what would be a good photo that would capture that and one song that you associate with that experience. And then the last one is, if you were to share 3 parts of your identity with your students or coworkers, what would you share? What would you want them to know about you? Same thing, try to open Google Sites on your drive and write a personal brief description, include photos, yours or from the internet, anything that captures your hobbies maybe, or something that actually is representative of you. So let me see. All righty, some people are logging off, they're in different timing. Thank you so much for participating. Like I said, the timing we had for this was to actually have this presentation go until 5:15. I think one thing that I would like you to take away from this is, if you haven't tried Google Sites, definitely do it. You could find it on your Google Drive, right? There's a triangle. If you scroll down, it says Google Sites. There's times when it feels very easy and intuitive to use, but there's other times when you want to do stuff and it's very limiting. That's where students get frustrated. I would say you try it first before you actually incorporate some of these projects. Mother says, I shall try Google Sites. That's awesome, especially when your institution doesn't have access to, the fancier sites like Adobe. Google Sites is already incorporated there. I think I'll slowly move us to the wrap up of the session so that we can have maybe 5 minutes for chatting. But in conclusion, I feel that choosing writing tasks and move away from essays for a little bit engages students in the curriculum and it sparks their willingness to write. When we allow students to write about themselves, it sends them a message that their story is important and it's really worth sharing. And I have seen this with all the 3 projects that I have, especially with the identity map and the autobiography. I strongly believe that when we include more authentic and creative writing tasks, not only do we learn about our students' life, but we also see how they actually perceive their learning journey and what future goals they have, and also how we can actually help them and support them to accomplish those goals. And last part is narrative and multimodal writing tasks definitely turn our students into introspective learners and individuals. These are my key takeaways from things I have done in my classroom, specifically through these 3 projects. I'm going to leave you with this quote by one of my all-time favorite writers. There's a little bit of story with this. Just yesterday, someone had donated books for our school library. And as I was sorting through the books and saying which are the ones we want to keep, which are the ones we want to donate, I found in the box this book that I've been wanting to buy for forever. It's always out of stock on Amazon. It's by Bell Hooks, Teaching to Transgress. And I just flipped the page open and the person who had read it before me had highlighted this quote and it says, "To teach in a manner that respects and cares for the souls of our students is essential if we are to provide the necessary conditions where learning can most deeply and intimately begin." I don't think I need to explain anything else about this quote. I'm just going to say, I hope you found this presentation or this mini workshop useful. I hope you found it helpful. I hope you have a little bit more tools as an educator to use and apply in your classes and with your students. And I want to thank each and every one of you for everything you're doing every single day in whatever area of education you're working. I appreciate you as a fellow educator, and I'm sure your students and coworkers appreciate it as well. These are my 2 references that I use here, and thank you so very much. That is my email. If you have any questions or thoughts, you could email me. I'm also going to drop it in the chat. If you want to get some of these materials, you want to chat, you want to, there we go. And at this point, feel free to unmute yourselves if you want to share anything, any questions, any comments, anything you have. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.